go on to the next slide.
The business process issue is really interesting because it was not just the design manual and the Smart Transportation Guidebook that emerged from all this activity. There's more on this in the book, but the kinds of asset management, risk assessment tools, and so on that supported the Fix It First approach required a lot of hard work and are still ongoing. And also, it's not a surprise, but it was a big piece of work that at about the same time, PennDOT really dug into the linking planning with NEPA issues. And in fact, its new project prioritization and programming approach is actually called linking planning with NEPA, I think. Is that right, Jim? And has now been tied into communities and the TIP process.
Correct, and Bill's been a real strong leader in this area as well. But we're almost at implementation, but one of the things that we really made a transition to in the culture change was just sharing more information with our partners as we determine what problems we're going to solve and what scale of problem we're going to solve. And this is really focusing on linking planning with NEPA. Right now we have about 23 data sets that we're visually being able to show so that as people begin to wrestle with the issues surrounding a transportation problem and a proposed solution, whether it's right-of-way or cultural resources, that information can be brought much easier at the beginning of the process when those projects are being selected and scaled out.
Cruising along through this, one of the points that we haven't included in the slide deck but is described in the book is that Pennsylvania has a long tradition and a very, I don't think it's unique, but I think it's not common across other DOTs, of collaborating in building its TIP with its MPOs and with local governments. To the extent that a consensus process is actually used for basically divvying up the categories of expenditure that the TIP will cover. So that's done with everybody at the table, and then becomes the basis of the TIP revisions. I had not ever seen anything quite like it. I'm sure my experience is comprehensive, but it was something that we saw there that is well worth learning more about as different states think about collaborative structures for their TIPs. But that brings me, or us, to the Jim Ritzman I got to show people what we mean program.
Exactly.
Which now Jim really can call this the Jim Ritzman program because we had a picture in Harrisburg that you had given a fair amount of your life to this over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and, again, it was a Secretary Beeler's brainchild. Basically, it was the whole evolution. We had some themes. We tried to give more detail of what we meant by those themes in the Smart Transportation Guidance. Then we implemented that guidance into our design manuals. And again, this is basically saying we wanted people to know what smart transportation looked like. And the best way of doing that was to say, hey, we have some money here, and if you got an idea of what matches up with these themes, we'd love to fund that project. So we've had 2 rounds, ultimately using about $85 million, but I said the advertising alone, by having over 600 submissions or applications prepared to go after that money was just an incredible way of building interest. But this is really to say we wanted to pick the best projects across the state, both from a urban, a suburban, and a rural perspective, to say, what does smart transportation look like in your community, and how can we help get those projects funded? And again, we're getting a majority of those projects are under construction now, and we've had some that have been completed, but we wanted to have the poster child of saying this is what we mean and this is what your community can look like.
Yeah, if I could, Jim's being a little bit modest. I think between he and Secretary Beeler, they came up with a very clever way to incentivize the learning, because really it was the local government's opportunity to say, here's what smart transportation means in our community, and we're gonna try to attach our goals, our creative inputs, our community aspirations to those dollars and to those smart transportation themes, and put their best foot forward with these submissions. And I'll tell you, it was an eye-opener. I think Jim would say the same. We got some great creative body of work from our community partners.
People characterize this, or some people have characterized this as sort of a state-level mini Tiger program, which I think is good on one level, but doesn't do it full justice on another. Talk just a little bit about how you found the money and how you ran the process.
Well, as we, from a financial perspective, how we came up with the money, we have formulas for each of the funding categories, and one of those funding categories is a discretionary account for the Secretary of Transportation. So he pulled away the types of funds that typically went to the capacity expansion projects that couldn't fully be funded regionally, and most of that money went for structurally deficient bridges. But he kept back a small amount and used those funds. But the kinds of things that were very different, again, was really encouraging the collaboration, really encouraging leveraging other resources. In the selection panel, we included other state agencies in a group called 10,000 Friends, to help provide input in addition to our MPOs and our RPOs and our district offices, to provide input on making sure that we make good choices with those selecting those projects.
There's a lot of information about this in the book, and one of the things that I was very interested in Pennsylvania would love to see explored just in its own right is the Excel spreadsheet that actually ran the selection process. It was fascinating to see both the sophistication and the practicality, both combined, that PennDOT staff took to sorting through 600 projects, getting a good balance of projects, getting quality projects, achieving some regional distribution, and a bunch of other values that the process had to achieve, without seeming to tie up the agency in 8 years of competitive evaluation. So it's a recommended resource for people who might want to consider something similar. To go to the takeaways, if you like, from the SSTI review panel, these were the three highlights. Smart transportation achieved a shift in capital investment strategies. Smart transportation worked towards fundamental changes in project design and development. And smart transportation succeeded in driving this home, or perhaps better said, following Bill a little bit, pulling it out of the communities in ways that would make the goals and aspirations of smart transportation alive for a body of citizens and communities that need to play in the future. And so if you look at slide 12, these were things that people in the department, from then Secretary Beeler through all kinds of people across the department, well, I take your, Jim and Bill, these are yours.
Yeah, I would say that this is a slide that we used on several occasions just to talk about what smart transportation is now and how the organization was a little bit previously. And I guess I boil it down into a couple where we basically say you want to understand the individual uniqueness or the context of each project or each problem that you're trying to work on. You want to really listen and understand what a community thinks their community should look like, what they want their community to be like into the future, and as well as given flexibility to engineers to really engineer something and not just use cookie cutters in a traditional approach. It's to really understand what the issues and what the problems are and try to come up with a fix that really works. I'm sure Bill has a thought as well on these slides.
Well, I think you hit most of the ones I might speak to as well. I mean, it's all about community aspirations, but if you think about it, if you drill down to the project level, you go out to a public meeting, well, what is your intent there? Your intent is to get feedback about what the solutions might look like. And in our own unique way, I guess, I believe smart transportation has given us a leg up because our design staff, our planners, we're all thinking about it a little bit differently. We're giving more credence to those maybe softer end solutions. We're talking about multimodal approaches Whereas in the past, we might have been a little bit more ho-hum and a little bit more static in our thinking. So I think that's the big gain. That's the real big takeaway for us.
If you look at the next slide, you'll appreciate that the SSTI review team, while impressed, had some thoughts. And the most important of them boiled down to these. At the SSTI team, there is a real concern for how land use impacts and consequences are going to follow from transportation planning. Clearly, a topic of broad interest, and one particularly important in Pennsylvania, given some of the small things that are indicated by one of the earlier slides. Pennsylvania, like a lot of states, has only crude tools for integrating land use and transportation and development. And there was a sense that to be successful in smart transportation aspirations, those tools were going to have to be honed, and they were going to have to be used with greater aggressiveness, not only by the department, but by other players with those influences. So we left that message. The need to work even harder on the question of collaborative decision-making with the communities and the MPOs, it was apparent. You can see from Bill's comments that these were hardly issues or arenas that PennDOT was neglecting. But one also sees from a set of problems such as Pennsylvania was facing, that this is a task which is never done, and on which still more work is required by PennDOT to reach its goals. We were concerned about something that was readily conceded at PennDOT, which is that work on performance measures was lagging behind some of the other things that people were spending time and energy on. And one of the things that we did at a very sort of high level in the book was to suggest in an appendix a bunch of things that PennDOT might be looking at if the goal was to take PennDOT's performance in performance measures sort of from trailing the leaders to leaping ahead. So that might be a part of the book that people would be interested in, but the theme back to PennDOT was keep pushing performance measures and outcome accountability. And finally, we haven't talked much about the financial conundrum. We will a bit more in a minute. But PennDOT went through not a happy experience with a tolling proposal that had been acted upon by the Pennsylvania legislature and then did not pass the review screen at FHWA. Taking away some of the benefits of the tolling proposal that would have come in the finance area, and stymieing Pennsylvania's sense that tolling for both revenue and demand management is a really important part of moving forward. So there was nobody at PennDOT that contested that this was an area that more work was needed on, and the SSTI review team wanted to underscore the point. The next slide talks about these issues, and I guess it's also still on this slide, and has this sidebar on this fascinating issue we've seen, which I'm not going to talk about now unless one of you guys want to, that the shale oil development in Pennsylvania presents an enormous opportunity and challenge for how transportation planning fits into community futures. Either you guys want to talk about that for just a minute and where things now stand with that project and program?
Well, I can tell you that on an operational level, it's a little bit troubling. We've got major changes in traffic patterns. We got major changes in the way trucks are being brought into our secondary roads. On the plus side, it's great news for Pennsylvania that we have a natural resource that can be tapped into and actually provide a meaningful solution to energy problems in the country. But it requires large equipment. It requires tanker after tanker of frac water. The tools of the trade are enormous in their size and their bulk. Dealing with it on our secondaries is a big challenge for us, and I don't think it's completely reconciled. It's a work in progress. But I will tell you that our strategy, at least to this point on the ground, is to be cost neutral. In other words, if the industry has to come in on our secondaries that don't have great foundation, don't have great stability, we have to fix that, and they have to be part of that fix. and we have a working arrangement with them to make sure that that happens. But much more is yet to come.
In order to leave some time for questions, I will do the next 3 slides all at once, basically. The first concedes or recognizes a very important fact, which is that PennDOT today is under a different state administration than it was for the 8 years until this recent January, with a new governor, a Republican, concerned about transportation issues and still bedeviled, as the state is generally, with the funding conundrum that has to be solved. And so PennDOT is still and will now be very focused on trying to get a funding proposal through in Pennsylvania. If anybody from other states is going to be very surprised at that because no one else is doing the same thing. But as the next slide suggests, it's very interesting to ask the question, how is smart transportation playing into a new administration in Pennsylvania? And the short answer is that while the new administration is interested in new revenue, does want to do some new capacity projects in addition to other things, that the climate in Pennsylvania is very supportive of the kinds of initiatives and approaches that have been developed in the smart transportation program. So you can expect to see smart transportation continued and new things grafted on under a new administration. I want to wrap up so we can have some questions. I just show in the last slide, it's really important to try to figure out what all this meant. Jim, this was one of the projects that died in 2004 for lack of money and is now under construction as a different project. It's the US 202 project. It's really worth spending a minute on why this is different and what it is as a symbol of smart transportation thinking.
I think one of the things that's most important about this, one, yes, it was one of the projects that was killed, and it ended up being resurrected with a lot of hard work from our previous Deputy Secretary for Planning, Larry King, a lot of community meetings, laying out 50-scale drawings and just talking about design. Ultimately, what happened was a reduction of interchanges. There are a few 2-lane parkway-type perspective rather than a standalone interstate look-alike kind of project. But I think the key to this was the continual working with a community to understand what project costs are, establishing a funding cap for those, and just working through and really massaging a project until it fits within a level of investment that's
I forget the number, I'm sure you haven't, but if you look at this picture and think of the corridor, the kinds of savings involved ran into hundreds of millions of dollars over earlier conceptions. Well, we've run through this in something like the allotted time so that we can have some time for questions or thoughts that come from listeners. Ellen?
We're actually having a fire alarm here at our building, so we're going to unmute everyone and let you talk among you. But we have to leave the building. This is some sort of end.
Leave it muted like that.
Well, if this is,
thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Are we done now, or do we get to go on any further?
No, you can. Anyone who wants to ask a question can still ask a question. So just speak up. We have unmuted everyone on the line so that they can just ask questions. But we have to sign off now. Thank you.
Thanks.
I can't resist telling my best fire alarm story, which was a public meeting, an angry public meeting about a large water storage tank that my agency was trying to site. This is when I was in the water business, not the transportation business, in a suburban community outside of Boston. And we had about 300 people in the hall, and it was getting worse and worse. And my public affairs guy came up to me and said, "Now's when we pull the fire alarm." So I thought that was a great strategy, the old-time mode of public input. And so we'll skip that anecdote, although it does have a nice visual image. And I'm sorry that this carefully orchestrated technological marvel of a webinar has been interrupted by a fire alarm. Is there anybody out there who can or would like to ask a question?
It's *5, I think, on your keypad. You wanna, or you just weigh in. Nobody? Well, as they compose their thoughts, Doug, this is Joel. I thought that was great. Doug and James and Bill. I think that worked pretty well. Sorry about the technological difficulties at the beginning.
I want to just say
first webinar.
If we still have people on the line.
They're here. I see.
Oh, good. Well, I mean our listeners, not just our speakers. I really feel that
I'm referring to, Doug. Okay.
That the value of this is the way it contributes to an ongoing conversation. As you could easily see, Jim and Bill are wonderful spokespeople for what they've been doing in their department. I think the report, which is really an outgrowth of Little Adventure in Harrisburg we all shared together, is, I doubt there's such a thing anymore as the last word in anything. It's a good first word in presenting some of what Pennsylvania went through, and I think people from other states might find it an interesting document to read and get senses of. And I also feel that SSTI is positioning itself as a place where a conversation among state DOT people can happen. It's not the only location for that conversation, but I hope that it will be a venue for people who want to talk about fresh ideas and speak with and enjoy the experience or benefit from the experience of people around the country. Everyone's doing the same thing in some respects. No one's doing the same thing in another, so there's plenty to talk about.
Fair enough. So, any questions out there? I'm hearing only silence. DDD.
Hello.
Yeah, hi. Could you identify yourself?
My name's Kathleen Collins. I'm out in Colorado at
Hi.
the Colorado Department of Transportation.
Uh-huh.
And I was just wondering, is your guidebook and the presentation going to be available electronically for us to download? Because we're very interested.
Let's see. The presentation, the webinar you just saw, yeah, that will be available, and I hope it's been taped. I don't know quite what they've done here, but usually we tape the thing so you could listen to this whole conversation, including the fire alarm noise as well. It should all be up on the website.
Follow-up information, like you have the guidebook that explains the 10 points that you were trying to make. Are there planning manuals that you created as well besides that 10-point guidebook?
Yeah.
All that stuff that stuff is available at the Pennsylvania site. It's also all available at SSTI's website. So.
Yeah, and be careful what you ask for, because these people in Pennsylvania,
unbelievable. Yeah, it's unbelievable.
they knew how to turn out the paper and the manuals and the notebooks and the reports. The quantity of stuff is quite large. We looked at a lot of it. It's very impressive. A good source is the PennDOT website, and I think Jim and Bill would be happy also to guide people to specific documents. They did some very interesting work with local communities. And in the report for SSTI that you can link to on the SSTI website, there's more information about all of that can guide your questioning.
Yeah, and if you get on the Pennsylvania DOT website, you can link right to Smart Transportation. There's a number of presentations that are available. Some of the manual type linkages are out there as well. So there's a lot. Like Doug said, there's an avalanche worth.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Other questions out there?
This is Stan Caldwell with Carnegie Mellon out of Pittsburgh.
Okay. Hi, Stan.
Hi. I was wondering if you guys had discussed or looked into the intelligent transportation systems and implementation of those for some of the smart transportation initiatives.
Yeah, I think that's a backdrop to creative solutions. So if we can provide real-time information to travelers related to incidents or weather-related concerns, whatever it might be, that's wrapped up in a project delivery process. So ITS is out there for sure.
Yeah,
however, my sense, this is Doug speaking, my sense is that this is an area where PennDOT was working with a bunch of concepts from 511 services to some active traffic management things, but that harvesting the creative stuff that's going on around the country requires you to not just look at Pennsylvania, but a lot of other states, and also quite a lot of what's going on in the private sector. So I hope that that's an area that SSTI is going to weigh in on with more of an emphasis than it really had in the PennDOT review.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I think there's two things I'd want to say. One, first of all, whenever we talked about reducing the investment in capacity expanding projects, we recognized the need for more investment in getting the most out of the existing infrastructure that we do have. So I think that was definitely an ITS. How can you increase throughput with existing lane width? And one of the other things, just to let you know, we've been in contact fairly frequently with the Tech 21 effort at Carnegie Mellon. So we're pretty familiar with, I think, what you're talking about, and we're certainly looking to get more engaged there.
Okay, fair enough. I think we have time for maybe one more question. Who wants the last word? Last question. Going once, going twice. Okay, go on. Doug, James, Bill, any closing remarks, bits of wisdom, anything?
Well, my only closing remarks was that I'm now a retired secretary, and it's fun to be reminded of how challenging the work is of people who are doing this stuff now, and also that you can get results. And it was fun to be in Pennsylvania and come away with a sense of excitement and achievement.
Well, Doug, as you know, no good deed goes unpunished, and we certainly are hoping to use you again on other sorts of assessments like this. James or Jim?
Yeah,
and
I
Bill,
think the thing that I'd say is, we really appreciated SSTI putting that panel together and coming and just looking at what we did. It was greatly experienced and understanding staff who asked great questions. I think it was exciting for our staff who was at the meeting to hear people who were so interested in what we were doing. And I think that was, everybody walked away from that day and a half really encouraged about what we had done. And I think sometimes just in the busy world of state DOT work, you don't pause and take time to really look back on some of your successes and try to continue to think, how do we advance this cause? So I guess I want to send a thank you out to Doug especially, and you, Joel, for being so involved.
Okay, and Bill?
Well, I have to echo the thank you and say that the objectivity was really key for us moving forward. The tough questions that are being posed through SSTI, some of the tag-ons related to really getting our arms around performance measures, et cetera, really key for us moving forward. So I do appreciate all the scrutiny, and it was good, positive scrutiny. It wasn't arduous in the least. And it was great that we had practitioners involved in the conversations.
Yeah, I should say for those of you who are not thoroughly familiar with SSTI yet, and it is a work in progress, the emphasis is on practicality. Of course, we have policy views and values and so on, but the point is to actually, I think we all sort of know what we're aiming at here, and the point is, okay, let's help the departments and the locals actually get there faster by learning with each other, learning from each other better. Okay, so let's wrap it up there. Let me thank the speakers one last time, and then assure everybody who is on here that the webinar series will continue with people at least approaching the expertise, wisdom, et cetera, and humor of the speakers you had today, but the technology infinitely improved, so it'll be effortless, it'll be seamless, it'll be beautiful, and we won't have a fire alarm next time. Stay tuned for further dispatches from us, and check the website for a recording, or at least the audio or the visual, at least of this webinar that you just heard. Okay, thanks everybody. Thanks to the speakers and everyone who listened in.